The dust had barely settled on her mother's grave when the first whisper started that Sage Whitmore had brought death itself to Winnetka, California. And by the time the sun set that August evening in 1883, every soul in town believed it. She stood at the edge of the cemetery, her black mourning dress clinging to her thin frame, watching as the townspeople hurried past without meeting her eyes, their faces twisted with fear and superstition. Her mother had been the seventh person to die in 6 months, and though consumption had ravaged the woman's lungs for years, the timing was enough to seal Sage's fate in the minds of those who needed someone to blame. She was 21 years old and utterly alone. Her father had died when she was 16, trampled by a spooked horse during a summer storm that had come out of nowhere. Her younger brother had drowned in the creek 2 years later, swept away by a flash flood despite being the strongest swimmer in the county. Now her mother was gone too, and the pattern was too clear for the superstitious residents of Winnetka to ignore. Sage Whitmore was cursed, they said. Death followed her like a shadow, claiming everyone she loved. The boarding house where she had taken a room after selling her family's small ranch refused to let her stay another night. Mrs. Henderson, a woman who had once brought soup to Sage's ailing mother, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and her mouth set in a grim line. "I have other tenants to think about," she said, not unkindly but firmly. "My husband says you have to go. People are talking and it is not good for business." Sage gathered her few belongings in a worn carpet bag and walked into the dusty street as the evening light turned everything golden. She had nowhere to go. The general store owner had refused her custom that morning, claiming he was out of flour even though she could see the sacks stacked behind the counter. The seamstress had turned her away from a job she desperately needed, making the sign against evil when Sage approached. Even the church, where her family had worshipped for 2 generations, felt hostile now. Reverend Thompson had delivered a sermon the previous Sunday about the dangers of harboring evil in the community, and though he had not named her directly, every eye in the congregation had turned to stare at where she sat alone in the back pew. She found herself walking toward the outskirts of town, where the buildings gave way to scrub brush, and the rolling hills of the California countryside stretched endlessly under a sky that was turning the color of blood oranges. There was an old abandoned homestead about 3 miles out, a place she remembered from childhood rides with her father. Perhaps she could shelter there until she figured out what to do next. The thought of leaving Winnetka entirely crossed her mind, but she had barely enough money for food, let alone passage to another town. Besides, where would she go? The curse would follow her, or so everyone believed. She had walked perhaps a mile when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. She did not turn around, assuming whoever it was would ride past without acknowledgement like everyone else had done. But the horse slowed, and a man's voice called out, "Miss Whitmore, Sage Whitmore." She stopped and turned, one hand shading her eyes against the setting sun. The rider was a man she had never seen before, though that was not unusual. Winnetka was a small town, but it was also a stopping point for cattle drives and travelers heading to the coast. He sat easy in the saddle, a tall man with broad shoulders and a weathered face that suggested he spent most of his life outdoors. His hat was pushed back enough that she could see dark hair and eyes that looked at her with curiosity rather than fear. "I am Sage Whitmore," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Who are you?" "Parker Crane," he said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. He swung down from the horse with the fluid grace of someone who had been riding since childhood. "I just came into town about an hour ago, looking for work. Heard some interesting talk in the saloon." Sage felt her heart sink. Of course he had heard. The whole town was probably still talking about the cursed girl, warning this stranger to stay away from her. "Then you know to keep your distance," she said, turning to continue walking. "I would not want to bring misfortune on you too." She heard his footsteps behind her, crunching on the dry earth. "That is not why I followed you," he said. "I followed you because I heard that you needed help, and that nobody in this town has the backbone to offer it." Sage stopped again, turning to face him with surprise evident on her face. "You do not believe what they say about me." Parker shrugged, leading his horse by the reins as he walked beside her. "I believe that sometimes bad things happen to good people, and that fear makes folks see patterns where there are none. I knew a man once who lost his whole family to cholera within a week. Nobody called him cursed. They just said it was a terrible tragedy and moved on. But you are a young woman alone, and that makes you an easy target." Sage felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. She had not realized how much she needed to hear someone say those words, to acknowledge that perhaps she was not the cause of every terrible thing that had happened. "The whole town thinks I am cursed," she said quietly. "They have made it clear I am not welcome." "Then the whole town is made up of fools," Parker said matter-of-factly. "Where are you headed?" "There is an old homestead a few miles out. I thought I might stay there until I can figure out what to do." She hesitated, then added, "I have nowhere else to go." Parker was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the darkening landscape. "That old Murphy place. It has been abandoned for at least 5 years. Roof is probably half caved in by now, and I would bet money that rattlesnakes have made themselves comfortable in there." Sage felt tears prick at her eyes but refused to let them fall. "I do not have another option." "You do now," Parker said. "I passed a ranch about 7 miles south of here on my way into town. They have got a help wanted sign posted. Owner's name is Thomas Garrett. He is looking for a cook and a general hand. I was planning to head out there tomorrow to see about the work." "Nobody will hire me," Sage said, the words bitter on her tongue. "Not once they hear my name." Parker stopped walking and turned to face her fully. The last light of the sun caught his face, illuminating features that were rugged but kind. "Then we do not tell them your name right away. You go buy something else until you can prove yourself through your work. Once they see you are a decent person and a hard worker, the rest will not matter." "You want me to lie. I want you to survive," Parker said. "And sometimes surviving means being clever. Besides, taking a different name is not really lying. Lots of folks in California are starting over with new identities. That is part of what makes this place what it is." Sage considered his words. Everything in her upbringing told her that deception was wrong, but everything in her current situation told her she would not last another week if she continued being honest. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not know me at all." Parker smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and more approachable. "My mother used to say that you can judge the character of a person by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. I figure the same applies to how you treat those that everyone else has given up on. Besides, I have been in situations where I needed help and nobody offered it. I know what that feels like." The honesty in his voice touched something deep in Sage's heart. She found herself nodding, accepting his help even though every cautious instinct told her not to trust anyone. "What name should I use?" "What about Sarah?" "Sarah Wallace." "Close enough to your real name that you will answer to it naturally, but different enough that nobody will make the connection unless they are really looking." "Sarah Wallace," Sage repeated, testing the words. They felt strange in her mouth, like wearing someone else's clothing, but they also felt like possibility. "All right, I will try it." They made camp that night under the stars, sharing the dried beef and hard biscuits Parker had in his saddlebag. He built a small fire and made coffee in a battered tin pot, and they sat on opposite sides of the flames, talking quietly as the night settled around them. Parker told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to work cattle from his father and his uncles, about the restlessness that had driven him west when he was 19. He was 24 now, he said, and had worked ranches from Arizona to Oregon, never staying in one place for more than a year or two. "Why not settle down?" Sage asked, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders as the temperature dropped. August nights in California could be surprisingly cold once the sun disappeared. Parker stared into the fire, his expression thoughtful. "I guess I have been looking for something, though I could not tell you exactly what. A place that feels like home, maybe, or a reason to stop moving." He looked up at her, and even in the dim firelight she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "What about you? What do you want once you get past all this trouble?" No one had asked Sage what she wanted in years. Since her father's death, life had been about survival, about taking care of her ailing mother and trying to keep the ranch running until it became clear they would have to sell. She had forgotten that wanting things was even an option. "I want to feel safe," she said finally. "I want to wake up without fear. I want people to look at me and see a person, not a curse." "That is not too much to ask," Parker said softly. "We will get you there, Sarah." The use of her assumed name jolted her slightly, but she understood its necessity. If she was going to start over, she had to commit to it fully. "Thank you, Parker. I do not know how to repay your kindness." "Do not worry about that right now. Just focus on getting through tomorrow." They took turns keeping watch through the night, though Parker insisted she sleep first. Sage lay down near the fire with her carpetbag as a pillow and her shawl as a blanket. And despite everything that had happened, she found herself drifting off to sleep more peacefully than she had in months. Perhaps it was the exhaustion, or perhaps it was the simple comfort of knowing someone was looking out for her, even if that someone was a stranger she had met only hours ago. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee. Parker had already packed up most of their camp by the time Sage woke, and he handed her a cup of the strong brew with a smile. "Ready to become Sarah Wallace?" "As ready as I will ever be," she said, taking a sip and feeling the warmth spread through her chest. They reached the Garrett Ranch by mid-morning, riding double on Parker's horse after he insisted she could not walk the full 7 miles in her condition. The ranch was smaller than the sprawling operation Sage had heard about further inland, but it was well maintained, with a tidy house, a substantial barn, and several corrals holding horses and cattle. Thomas Garrett himself came out to meet them, a man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of sun-weathered skin that came from decades of outdoor work. "Help you folks?" he asked, his tone neutral but not unfriendly. Parker dismounted and helped Sage down before speaking. "Saw your sign in town, sir. Said you were looking for help. I am a ranch hand, been working cattle for about 10 years now. This is Sarah Wallace. She is an excellent cook and general worker, good with animals and not afraid of hard work." Garrett looked them over with the assessing eye of a man who had hired and fired dozens of workers over the years. "You two married?" "No, sir," Parker said smoothly, "but we are traveling together for safety. Sarah was heading to the coast when her funds ran out. I offered to help her find work along the way." It was a story that would make sense to anyone familiar with the realities of traveling in California. Sage kept her expression neutral, neither confirming nor denying the tale. Garrett nodded slowly. "I could use both of you, truth be told. My cook just up and left last week to get married, and my regular hand broke his leg falling off a roof he had no business being on in the first place. Pay is fair, food and board included. I will expect honest work and no trouble." "You will get both, sir," Parker said. What about you, miss? You have anything to say for yourself? Sage met his eyes directly, drawing on reserves of courage she had not known she possessed. I am a hard worker, Mr. Garrett. I will not let you down. Something in her tone must have convinced him, because he nodded and extended his hand first to Parker, then to Sage. All right then. Welcome to the Garrett Ranch. Let me show you where you will be staying. The accommodations were simple but clean. Parker would stay in the bunkhouse with two other ranch hands, while Sage was given a small room off the kitchen in the main house. It had a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the eastern hills. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, it felt like a palace. Mrs. Garrett, a plump woman with kind eyes and capable hands, took Sage under her wing immediately. I have been trying to manage the cooking along with everything else, she said, showing Sage the large kitchen with its cast iron stove and well-stocked pantry. But I confess I am not much good at it. My daughters usually help, but they are both married and living in town now. If you can keep these men fed without poisoning them, you will be a godsend. Sage smiled, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. I can do that, Mrs. Garrett. My mother taught me to cook for large groups. We used to help with the church socials back home. Where is home, dear? The question was innocent enough, but Sage felt her heart race. A small town north of here, she said vaguely. Not much to tell, really. My parents passed, and I decided to try for a fresh start on the coast. Mrs. Garrett patted her hand sympathetically. I am sorry for your loss, dear. Well, you will find good people here. My Thomas is fair and the work is honest. You just do your part and we will all get along fine. Sage threw herself into the work with desperate determination. She woke before dawn to start breakfast for the ranch hands, preparing enormous skillets of eggs and potatoes, platters of biscuits with gravy, and pots of strong coffee. She learned the preferences of each man quickly, discovering that Parker liked his coffee black and scalding hot, that Miguel, one of the other hands, had a weakness for anything with cinnamon, and that old Charlie, who had worked for the Garretts for 20 years, would eat anything as long as there was plenty of it. During the day, she cleaned the house, helped Mrs. Garrett with the washing and mending, tended the vegetable garden, and gathered eggs from the chicken coop. In the evening, she prepared supper, another substantial meal to fuel men who had spent all day working under the California sun. By the time she fell into bed each night, she was exhausted, but it was the good kind of tired that came from honest work and feeling useful. Parker was equally dedicated to his job. Sage watched him from the kitchen window sometimes, seeing how naturally he moved among the cattle and horses, how the animals responded to his calm presence. He was patient with the skittish horses, firm but gentle with the cattle, and always willing to take on whatever task needed doing without complaint. Thomas Garrett noticed too, and within a week, he was trusting Parker with increasingly important responsibilities. On Sunday afternoons, when the work was lighter, Parker would find Sage in the garden or hanging laundry, and they would talk. He told her more about his travels, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. She found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about her loneliness after her father died, about her fear that she really was cursed, about the guilt she carried for surviving when everyone she loved had perished. "That is not your fault," Parker said firmly one afternoon as they sat on the fence watching the sunset. "You cannot control when people die. You just cannot." "But why am I still here when they are gone?" Sage asked, voicing the question that had haunted her for months. "What makes me so special that I get to live?" "Maybe you are here because you have things left to do," Parker said. "Important things that have not happened yet. Maybe you are supposed to meet someone or do something that changes everything. Or maybe there is no reason at all, and that is okay too. Not everything has to mean something, Sage. He had used her real name, she noticed. When they were alone, he called her Sage, keeping the fiction of Sarah Wallace for everyone else. She appreciated that more than she could express, the acknowledgement that she was still herself beneath the protective layer of deception. "You believe in fate?" she asked him. Parker considered the question, his profile sharp against the orange sky. "I think I believe in chance and choice. Chance brought me to Winnetka the day you needed help. Choice made me follow you instead of minding my own business. And here we are." "Here we are," Sage repeated softly. Something was growing between them, she realized. It had started as gratitude on her part and simple kindness on his, but it was becoming something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster when he walked into a room and left her feeling empty when he was gone. She tried to tell herself it was too soon, that she was too vulnerable and damaged for this, but her heart did not seem to care about such practical concerns. She thought perhaps Parker felt it too, based on the way he looked at her sometimes. A soft expression in his eyes that had nothing to do with friendship and everything to do with the kind of longing she recognized, because she felt it herself. But he never pushed, never made her uncomfortable, always maintaining the careful boundary of propriety even when they were alone. August turned to September, and Sage began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a life after all. The Garretts were pleased with her work and had already told her they hoped she would stay on indefinitely. She had saved a little money, enough to buy a new dress and a pair of sturdy boots. She had made a friend in Maria, Miguel's wife, who lived in a small house on the edge of the ranch property and had 3 young children who adored Sage's sugar cookies. But peace, Sage was learning, was often temporary. A rider came to the ranch on a Tuesday morning in mid-September, a man Sage recognized immediately with a sinking heart. It was Joseph Turner, who owned the feed store in Winnetka and had been one of the loudest voices calling her cursed. He dismounted in the yard and spoke with Thomas Garrett for several minutes, gesturing emphatically while Garrett's expression grew increasingly troubled. Sage watched from the kitchen window, her hands frozen in the dishwater. She saw Parker emerge from the barn, his posture alert and protective. She saw Mrs. Garrett come out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. And she saw Joseph Turner point directly at the house, his meaning clear when Garrett came inside. His face was stern. "Sarah, can you come outside, please?" She dried her hands slowly, buying time she did not have. Her mind raced with possibilities, but she knew there was really only one explanation. Somehow, Turner had discovered where she was. The question was what would happen now. Outside, Parker stood near his horse, his hand resting casually on the saddle but his body tense. Miguel had emerged from the barn as well, and Charlie stood on the bunkhouse steps. Everyone sensed something important was happening. "Mr. Turner here says your name is not Sarah Wallace," Garrett said without preamble. "He says you are Sage Whitmore from Winnetka, and that you lied to me about who you were." "Is this true?" Mrs. Garrett asked, her voice disappointed. Sage looked at Turner, who wore an expression of grim satisfaction, then at the Garretts and finally at Parker, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. "Yes," she said quietly. "My name is Sage Whitmore. I apologize for the deception, Mr. Garrett. I did it because I knew no one would hire me if they knew who I was. She is cursed," Turner said loudly. "Everyone in Winnetka knows it. Death follows her everywhere. You need to send her away before she brings misfortune on your ranch." "That is ridiculous," Parker said sharply. "She is not cursed. She is just a woman who has had bad luck." "Bad luck," Turner laughed harshly. "Her entire family is dead. 7 people died in Winnetka in the months before her mother passed. Animals went lame, crops failed, all because of her. Crops failed because we had a drought, Sage said, finding her voice. Animals went lame because there was a disease going around, and people died because of consumption and accidents and all the normal reasons people die. None of it had anything to do with me. Then why did it all stop once you left town? Turner shot back. Sage had no answer for that. She had not known that things had improved in Winnetka after her departure. The coincidence was damning, she had to admit, even though she knew in her heart it meant nothing. "How many people have died since she came here?" Parker asked Garrett directly. "How many animals? How have your crops been?" Garrett looked thoughtful. "No deaths. Lost 1 calf to a coyote, but that is normal. Garden has been producing better than usual, actually." "There you go," Parker said. "She has been here for weeks and everything is fine." "It is only a matter of time," Turner said stubbornly. "Mark my words, Garrett, you keep her here and you will regret it." Thomas Garrett looked at his wife, then at Sage. "Did you do the work I hired you for?" "Yes, sir," Sage said. "Did you do it well?" "I tried my best, sir." "Mrs. Garrett, what do you think?" The older woman studied Sage for a long moment. "I think she is a good worker and a kind girl. I think she has been through terrible things and deserves a chance." "And I think," she added, looking at Turner with surprising steel in her voice, "that spreading rumors about curses is ungodly and cruel." Garrett nodded. "I agree. Sage or Sarah or whatever you want to be called, you can stay." "Mr. Turner, I appreciate you riding out here, but your business is done now." Turner's face flushed red. "You are making a mistake, Garrett. When things start going wrong, do not say I did not warn you." He mounted his horse and rode off at a gallop, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The silence he left behind was heavy with tension. "I am sorry," Sage said, her voice small. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning." "Yes, you should have," Garrett said, but his tone was not unkind. "But I understand why you did not. From now on, though, I want honesty." "Can you give me that?" "Yes, sir, absolutely." "Good. Then let us get back to work. We have got a ranch to run." As everyone dispersed, Parker caught Sage's arm gently. "You all right?" "I thought he was going to send me away," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "I would not have let that happen," Parker said, and the fierce protectiveness in his tone made her believe him. "You are not going anywhere, Sage." She looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to say. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Parker opened his mouth, closed it, then seemed to make a decision. "Because I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "I have been trying not to, telling myself it is too soon and you have been through too much and I should give you space. But I cannot help it, Sage. Every day I see you working so hard, being so strong despite everything that has happened to you, and I think you are the bravest person I have ever met. And the kindest. And the most beautiful, though that is beside the point." Sage's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Parker, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now," he assured her. "I just needed you to know. I needed you to know that you are not cursed, and you are not alone, and if you will let me, I would like to stand beside you for whatever comes next." She found herself smiling despite the turmoil of the morning. "You are a good man, Parker Crane. I try to be. So what do you say? Can I court you properly? Take you for walks, bring you flowers, all that traditional romantic business?" Sage thought about all the reasons she should say no, all the ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about how Parker made her feel safe and seen and valued in ways she had almost forgotten were possible. "Yes," she said, "I would like that very much." His answering smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face with joy. "Then it is settled. We will start tonight after supper." There is a nice spot by the creek I have been wanting to show you." True to his word, Parker appeared at the kitchen door that evening after the dishes were washed and put away. He had cleaned up, she noticed, changing into a fresh shirt and combing his hair, though there was still dust on his boots that spoke of a long day's work. He offered her his arm with an almost courtly gesture, and they walked together through the gathering dusk toward the creek that ran along the western edge of the ranch property. The spot he showed her was lovely, a place where the creek widened into a small pool, reflecting the last light of the day like liquid gold. Cottonwood trees grew along the banks, their leaves rustling softly in the evening breeze. They sat on a fallen log, close enough that their shoulders touched, and talked as the stars came out one by one. Parker told her about his childhood in Texas, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about his mother's death when he was 12, and how his father had never been quite the same after. Sage told him about growing up in Winnetka when it was even smaller than it was now, about helping her father with the horses, about her dreams of someday seeing the ocean. "We could go there," Parker said. "To the ocean, I mean. It is only about 40 miles to the coast from here. We could take a day and ride there, see the water." "I would love that," Sage said softly. Parker reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused from work. "I meant what I said earlier, about falling in love with you. I know it is fast, and I know you have every reason to be cautious, but Sage, when I look at you, I see my future. I see a home and a life and all the things I have been searching for without knowing what I was looking for." Sage felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears this time, tears of relief and hope and budding joy. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "I tried not to because I was afraid that caring about someone else would bring them harm. But you make me want to be brave." "You are brave," Parker said firmly. "Bravest person I know." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a promise rather than a demand. Sage felt something inside her that had been frozen for months finally begin to thaw. She kissed him back, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she realized this was allowed. This was good. This was something she deserved. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Parker rested his forehead against hers. "You are not cursed," he whispered. "You are my blessing, Sage, the best thing that ever happened to me." The words wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket, soothing wounds she had thought would never heal. "Say that again," she asked. "You are my blessing," Parker repeated, pulling back to look her in the eyes. "Not a curse. Never a curse. A blessing." They stayed by the creek until full dark, talking and kissing and planning a future that felt impossibly bright after so many months of darkness. When they finally walked back to the ranch house hand in hand, Sage felt lighter than she had in years. Over the next few weeks, their courtship deepened into something solid and real. Parker found excuses to be near her throughout the day, helping her carry water from the well, fetching firewood for the stove, making her laugh with stories about the various animals and their distinct personalities. On Sunday afternoons, they would ride out together, exploring the surrounding countryside, and Parker kept his promise to take her to the ocean. The day they rode to the coast was one of the happiest of Sage's life. They left early in the morning, bringing a lunch Mrs. Garrett had packed for them and rode west through the golden California hills. As they got closer, Sage could smell the salt in the air, and then suddenly there it was, vast and blue and endless, stretching to the horizon under a cloudless sky. She dismounted and ran down to the water's edge, laughing as the cold waves washed over her bare feet. Parker followed more slowly, grinning at her obvious delight. They spent hours there, walking along the beach, collecting shells, eating their lunch while watching the seabirds dive for fish. Parker kissed her with the taste of salt on their lips, and Sage thought she had never been happier. "I want to marry you," Parker said suddenly, as they sat on the sand watching the sunset turn the ocean a dozen shades of orange and pink. "I know it has only been a couple of months, but I am certain, Sage. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to have children with you and grow old with you. Will you marry me?" Sage looked at him, this good man who had saved her life in more ways than one, and felt her heart expand with love so intense it almost hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Parker let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until they both collapsed laughing into the sand. He kissed her deeply, and Sage kissed him back with all the emotion she could not put into words. They rode back to the ranch as the stars came out, both giddy with happiness and plans for the future. When they told the Garretts their news, Mrs. Garrett cried happy tears and insisted on throwing them a proper engagement party. Miguel and Maria were delighted, and even old Charlie cracked a rare smile and offered his congratulations. The wedding took place on a beautiful October day, under the cottonwood trees by the creek where they had shared their first kiss. Reverend Anderson from the small church in the town near the ranch officiated, and it seemed like half the county turned out to celebrate. Mrs. Garrett had made Sage a dress of cream-colored silk, simple but elegant, and Maria had woven wildflowers into her hair. Parker wore his best clothes and could not stop smiling. As they exchanged vows, Sage felt the weight of the past finally lift from her shoulders. When Parker took her hand and promised to love her in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death parted them, she knew he meant every word. And when it was her turn to make those same promises, she spoke them clearly and firmly, no longer afraid of what loving someone might bring. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Anderson said with a warm smile. "You may kiss your bride." Parker needed no further encouragement. He pulled Sage close and kissed her thoroughly, to the applause and cheers of everyone gathered. When they finally broke apart, both laughing, Parker whispered in her ear, "Hello, Mrs. Crane." "Hello, husband," Sage whispered back, loving the sound of it. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Thomas Garrett pulled Parker aside at one point and offered him a partnership in the ranch, saying he could use a younger man with fresh ideas to help expand the operation. Parker accepted on the spot, and when he told Sage the news, she threw her arms around him, thrilled that they would be able to stay in this place that had become home. That night, in the small house Garrett had given them as a wedding present, a cozy two-room structure on the edge of the ranch property, Parker carried Sage over the threshold and set her down gently. "Welcome home, wife," he said softly. "Home," Sage repeated, the word feeling exactly right. "I never thought I would have this. A home, a husband, a future." "You have all of it now," Parker said, cupping her face in his hands. "And I promise you, Sage, I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that you deserve all of it." He kissed her then, and she kissed him back, and the night unfolded in tenderness and passion. Two people learning each other, choosing each other, becoming something new together. The following months were among the happiest of Sage's life. She and Parker settled into married life with surprising ease, discovering rhythms and routines that worked for them both. Sage continued to help Mrs. Garrett with the cooking and housework, but now she also had her own home to care for, and she took deep satisfaction in making it comfortable and welcoming. Parker thrived in his new role as Garrett's partner, bringing innovations to the ranch that increased both productivity and profits. In December, Sage realized she was pregnant. She told Parker on Christmas morning, giving him the news as a present, and he reacted with such pure joy that it made her cry happy tears. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down again, worried he might have hurt the baby. "Parker, I am only a few weeks along," she laughed. "I am not made of glass." I know," he said, grinning foolishly. "But there is a baby in there, our baby. I am going to be a father." "And I am going to be a mother," Sage said wonderingly. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. She thought of her own mother, of all the things she had learned from her, and felt a pang of grief that the woman would never meet her grandchild. But the grief was softer now, less sharp, tempered by joy and hope. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in August of 1884, almost exactly a year after Sage had fled Winnetka believing herself cursed, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Parker Crane, after both his grandfathers, and called him Tommy. He had Parker's dark hair and Sage's green eyes, and he was perfect in every way. Parker was besotted with his son from the first moment he held him. Sage would find him in the nursery at all hours, just watching the baby sleep, or holding him and talking to him about the ranch and the horses, and all the things they would do together when Tommy was older. "You are going to spoil him terribly," Sage said one afternoon, finding Parker rocking a sleeping Tommy even though the baby had been asleep for an hour. "I know," Parker said, not looking even slightly repentant. "He is my son. Spoiling him is my job." Sage smiled and went to sit beside them, resting her head on Parker's shoulder. "We made something pretty wonderful, did we not?" "The most wonderful thing in the world," Parker agreed. "Well, second most wonderful. You are still first." Life settled into a new normal with a baby in the house. It was exhausting and demanding, and sometimes overwhelming, but it was also filled with small moments of perfect joy. Tommy's first smile, his first laugh, the way he would grab onto Parker's finger and hold on with surprising strength. Sage had never imagined she could feel this content, this secure in her place in the world. When Tommy was about 6 months old, a letter arrived addressed to Sage. It was from a woman named Helen Turner, Joseph Turner's wife, and Sage opened it with some trepidation, but the contents surprised her. The letter was an apology. Mrs. Turner wrote that she had never believed in the curse, that she had argued with her husband about his treatment of Sage, and that she wanted Sage to know that many people in Winnetka regretted what had happened. The town, she wrote, was thriving now, and several people had come to realize that their troubles had been the result of natural causes and unfortunate timing rather than any curse. She hoped Sage was well and happy, and she wanted her to know that she would be welcome in Winnetka if she ever chose to visit. Sage showed the letter to Parker that evening after Tommy was asleep. "What do you think?" she asked. "Should I write back?" Parker considered the question carefully. "Do you want to?" "I think so. Not because I want to go back there, but because it feels like closure somehow, like the last piece of the past being put to rest." "Then write back," Parker said. "Tell her you forgive them if you do. Tell her you are happy. Tell her about our life here." Sage did exactly that, composing a letter that was honest but kind, explaining that while what happened had hurt her deeply, she had found a new life and a new family, and she bore no ill will. She wrote about Parker and Tommy, about the ranch and her work, about the person she had become in the year since leaving Winnetka. Mrs. Turner wrote back a month later with another warm letter, and thus began a correspondence that would continue for years. It was healing, Sage found, to know that at least some people in her former home had come to see her as a person rather than a symbol of fear. The years passed in the steady, satisfying rhythm of ranch life. Tommy grew into a bright, active toddler, then a curious boy who followed his father everywhere and begged to be lifted onto the horses. In 1887, Sage gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Margaret, and 2 years after that, another son they called Daniel. The house that had once seemed so spacious was now full of noise and laughter and the wonderful chaos of children. Parker proved to be an excellent father, patient and loving but firm when needed. He taught Tommy to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and he was just as devoted to Rose, braiding her hair with surprising dexterity and reading her endless stories before bed. Daniel, who was quieter than his siblings, had a special bond with his father built on their shared love of animals. The ranch prospered under Parker and Garrett's partnership. They expanded the cattle operation, bought more land, and developed a reputation for raising high-quality horses. Parker's instincts and hard work paid off, and by 1890, the Garrett Crane Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. Thomas Garrett retired gradually over the next few years, handing more and more responsibility to Parker. When he died peacefully in his sleep in 1893, he left his share of the ranch to Parker in his will, saying that he could think of no one better to carry on his legacy. Mrs. Garrett moved into town to live near her daughters but remained a frequent visitor and beloved grandmother figure to Sage and Parker's children. In 1895, Sage gave birth to their fourth child, another daughter they named Grace. By then, Sage was 33 and Parker was 36, both of them settled firmly into the life they had built together. The scared young woman who had fled Winnetka and the restless cowboy who had been searching for home were now confident, successful, deeply in love parents and partners. One evening when Grace was about 6 months old, Sage stood on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the hills. Parker came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different everything is from what I imagined," Sage said. 12 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I was cursed and alone and that I would never have anything good again. And now look at all this." She gestured to the house behind them, where they could hear Tommy helping Rose and Daniel with their homework, while Grace cooed in her cradle. Beyond that was the ranch, thriving and prosperous, a testament to years of hard work and smart decisions. "You were never cursed," Parker said, kissing the side of her neck. "You were just waiting for your blessing to arrive." "And did it?" Sage teased. "Arrive, I mean. What do you think?" Parker turned her around to face him, his eyes warm with love and humor. "Did your blessing arrive?" Sage pretended to consider the question, then smiled and pulled him down for a kiss. "Yes," she said against his lips. "My blessing arrived on a dusty road outside Winnetka, riding a horse and offering help when nobody else would. My blessing took my hand and said I was not cursed. My blessing became my husband and the father of my children and the best thing that ever happened to me." "Right back at you," Parker said softly. "You are my blessing too, Sage. Always have been, always will be." They stood there together in the fading light, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from pain and fear and hope. Inside the house, their children laughed, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed as the ranch hands brought them in for the night. It was an ordinary evening, really, but it was also perfect in its ordinariness, this life they had created together. The years continued to pass with the bittersweet swiftness of time well spent. The children grew older, each developing their own distinct personality. Tommy inherited his father's way with animals and his mother's determination, becoming an excellent horseman and a natural leader. Rose was artistic and gentle, spending hours sketching the landscape and the animals, filling journals with her observations of the world around her. Daniel was quiet and thoughtful, more interested in books than ranching, though he could hold his own when needed. And Grace, the baby, was fearless and spirited, charging into life with the confidence of a child who had never known anything but love and security. Parker and Sage watched their children grow with pride and occasional wistfulness for the baby years that passed too quickly. They faced the normal challenges of any family, illnesses and accidents, and the sometimes difficult task of raising children to be good people in a world that was not always kind. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. In 1902, Tommy turned 18 and announced his intention to marry Isabel Martinez, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. The wedding was a joyous affair that reminded Sage and Parker of their own wedding day nearly 20 years earlier. As she watched her son dance with his new bride, Sage felt the passage of time in her bones, the strange reality that she was now the mother of a married man. "We are getting old," she said to Parker as they danced together later in the evening. "Speak for yourself," Parker said, pulling her closer. "I am aging like fine wine." Sage laughed and swatted his shoulder. "You are impossible. You love it." "I do," she admitted. "I love you, and I love you. 20 years married and I am still falling more in love with you every day." It was true, Sage realized. Their love had not dimmed with time, it had only deepened, becoming richer and more complex as they navigated life's joys and sorrows together. They knew each other completely now, every quirk and flaw and strength, and they loved each other not despite those things but because of them. Tommy and Isabel built a house on the ranch and took over more of the daily operations, allowing Parker to step back slightly and spend more time with his younger children. Rose had announced her intention to attend art school in San Francisco, a decision that had surprised but ultimately pleased her parents. Daniel was planning to become a teacher, already working part-time at the small school in town. And Grace, at 13, was still figuring out who she wanted to be, trying on different dreams like dresses to see what fit. In 1905, Tommy and Isabel made Sage and Parker grandparents for the first time with the birth of a baby girl they named Lily. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Sage was overwhelmed by a rush of emotion. This tiny person was the future, the continuation of everything she and Parker had built. She thought of her own mother, wished fiercely that she could have seen this moment, then sent a silent thank you to whatever forces had brought her through darkness into this incredible light. Parker was equally enchanted with being a grandfather, though he complained loudly about feeling old. "Grandfather Parker," he said, testing the words. "That makes me sound ancient." "You are ancient," Tommy teased, "but we love you anyway." The family gathered often for Sunday dinners, a tradition Sage had started years ago and maintained religiously. The table would be crowded with people, food, noise, and love, exactly the kind of family gathering Sage had dreamed of during those dark days when she thought she would always be alone. In the summer of 1907, Sage received another letter from Winnetka. This one was from the mayor, inviting her to attend the town's 50th anniversary celebration. The letter acknowledged the injustice of how she had been treated and expressed the town's collective regret. They wanted her to know that she was remembered as a daughter of Winnetka who had been failed by her community, and they hoped she might forgive them enough to visit. Sage showed the letter to Parker, uncertain how to respond. "Do you think I should go?" Parker read the letter carefully. "I think that is entirely up to you. If you want closure, if you want to see the place where you grew up one more time, then go. If you would rather leave the past in the past, that is fine too. Either way, I support you." After much thought, Sage decided to attend. Not because she needed forgiveness from Winnetka, but because she wanted to show them who she had become. She wanted them to see that their cruelty had not destroyed her, that she had built a beautiful life despite their rejection. Parker, Tommy, and Rose accompanied her on the trip. Daniel and Grace stayed behind to manage the ranch and take care of little Lily. As they approached Winnetka, Sage felt her heart beat faster, anxiety and anticipation mixing in her chest. The town had grown since she had left. There were new buildings, wider streets, more people. But the core of it was the same. The church where her family had worshipped, the cemetery where they were buried, the spot where the boarding house had stood, though it had been replaced by a bank. The anniversary celebration was well attended, and when Sage was introduced, the applause was genuine and warm. Several people approached her to apologize personally, including Joseph Turner's son, who said his father had regretted his actions until the day he died. But the most important moment came when Sage visited the cemetery. She stood at her parents' graves, her mother and father side by side, and told them about her life, about Parker and the children and the grandchild, about the ranch and the success they had built, about the happiness she had found. "I am not cursed," she said softly, Parker standing supportively beside her. "I never was. I was just a girl who experienced terrible loss and people were too frightened to see the difference. But I am all right now. Better than all right. I am blessed." Parker took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You ready to go home?" "Yes," Sage said, taking one last look at the graves. "I am ready." They left Winnetka the next morning, and Sage felt lighter, as if some small weight she had not realized she was still carrying had finally been set down. The past was truly the past now, neither haunting her nor defining her. She was Sage Crane, wife and mother and grandmother, successful rancher and beloved member of her community. The girl who had fled Winnetka in fear and shame was gone, transformed into someone stronger and wiser and infinitely happier. The years continued their steady march forward. Rose graduated from art school and moved back to California, opening a studio in San Francisco, but visiting the ranch frequently. Daniel married a teacher named Catherine and moved to Sacramento, starting a family of his own. Grace shocked everyone by announcing her intention to study veterinary medicine, a highly unusual choice for a woman in 1912, but her parents supported her decision with pride. Tommy and Isabel had 2 more children, giving Sage and Parker 3 more grandchildren to dote on. The ranch continued to prosper, now being run primarily by Tommy with his father's guidance and support. Parker had officially retired at 60, though retirement for him meant spending more time with the horses and less time with the business side of things. In 1915, Sage turned 53 and Parker 56. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a large party attended by family, friends, and what seemed like half the county. As Sage looked around at the crowd, at her children and grandchildren, at the ranch that had become home, at Parker standing beside her with silver in his hair but the same love in his eyes, she felt profoundly grateful. 30 years, she said to him as they danced. "Can you believe it?" "Best 30 years of my life," Parker said. "Though I do not think I could have imagined all this back when I first saw you walking down that road outside Winnetka." "What did you think when you first saw me?" Parker considered the question. "I thought you looked lost and scared and determined all at once. I thought you were trying very hard to be brave. And I thought you were beautiful, though that seemed beside the point at the time. And now I know you are the bravest person I have ever met. Now I know that taking your hand that day was the smartest thing I ever did. Now I know that you were always meant to be my wife, my partner, my blessing." Sage felt tears prick at her eyes. After 30 years, he could still make her cry with his words. "You saved my life, Parker." "You know that, right? We saved each other," Parker corrected gently. "I was drifting, searching for something I could not name. You gave me purpose. You gave me home. We saved each other." It was true, Sage realized. Their love had been mutual from the start. Two damaged people finding healing in each other. Two lost souls finding home together. As they grew older, they settled into the comfortable rhythms of long marriage and grandparenthood. They traveled occasionally, finally making it to the East Coast to see the Atlantic Ocean, visiting their children in their various homes. But mostly they were content to stay at the ranch, watching sunsets from their porch, riding together through the hills they knew by heart, being together. In 1920, Sage became a great-grandmother when Tommy's eldest daughter had a baby. Holding that tiny person, the newest branch on their family tree, Sage marveled at how far she had come from that scared young woman who had thought herself cursed. She had lived to see her family extend into a fourth generation, had built a legacy of love that would continue long after she was gone. Parker's health began to decline slowly in his late 60s. Nothing dramatic but a gradual slowing down, joints that ached more, breath that came harder. Sage watched it happen with a mixture of sadness and acceptance. They were growing old together, exactly as they had promised they would. One evening in the summer of 1925, they sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. Sage was 63 now, Parker 66, both of them weathered by time but still fundamentally themselves. "You have any regrets?" Sage asked him. Parker thought about it carefully. "Not a one," he said finally. "I have lived a good life, Sage, a long life with someone I love beyond measure. I have raised children I am proud of and seen grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I have worked hard and loved deeply and laughed often. What more could a man ask for?" "Nothing," Sage said softly. "That is everything. What about you? Any regrets?" Sage considered the question, thinking back over her life. The tragedies of her youth, the fear and pain of being called cursed, the incredible luck of meeting Parker when she needed him most. The years of building a life together, the joys and sorrows that came with raising children, the deep satisfaction of watching her family grow. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. Everything that happened, even the terrible things, led me here, led me to you. How could I regret that?" Parker reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "I love you, Sage Crane. Have I told you that today?" "Only 3 times," Sage said, smiling, "but I never get tired of hearing it." "I love you," Parker repeated. "My blessing, my wife. My everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, the stars beginning to emerge one by one. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, the sound of family and life and continuity. Parker lived another 5 years, passing away peacefully in his sleep in 1930 at the age of 71. Sage grieved him deeply but not desperately, because their love had been so complete that she could feel it even in his absence. She lived another 12 years, surrounded by family, dying at 79 in 1942 with her children and grandchildren at her bedside. Her last words were about Parker. "I see him," she whispered to Tommy, who was holding her hand. "He is waiting for me. He says I am still his blessing." "You were blessed to have each other," Tommy said through his tears. "Yes," Sage agreed, her voice fading but her smile clear. "Blessed, not cursed, never cursed, always blessed." She closed her eyes and let go, ready to rejoin the man who had taken her hand on a dusty California road in 1883 and changed her life forever. The man who had seen past the fear and superstition to the person beneath. The man who had loved her completely and without reservation for 47 years of marriage and a lifetime of devotion. The ranch continued under Tommy's stewardship, and eventually his children's, the Crane name becoming synonymous with quality cattle and horses throughout California. Rose's paintings hung in galleries up and down the coast. Daniel's students remembered him as the best teacher they ever had. Grace became one of the first female veterinarians in California, treating animals throughout the Central Valley. But beyond the tangible legacy, beyond the land and the art and the careers, Sage and Parker's truest legacy was love. It was in the way their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren loved their own spouses, choosing partners who would stand beside them through hardship and joy alike. It was in the stories told and retold about the cowboy who took the cursed girl's hand and told her she was his blessing. It was in the understanding that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best things, if only we are brave enough to keep moving forward. The town of Winnetka eventually erected a small memorial to Sage Whitmore Crane, acknowledging the injustice she had suffered and celebrating the incredible life she had gone on to live. It stood in the town square, a reminder that fear and superstition could be overcome by courage and love, that curses were only as powerful as we allowed them to be, and that sometimes the greatest blessings came disguised as strangers on dusty roads offering help when nobody else would. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Sage and Parker rode together through endless golden hills under a sky full of stars, forever young, forever in love, forever blessed.